I'm David Cott, host of New History of Spain, and this is episode 17, where I will discuss the Visigoths' conversion to Catholicism under Reccared in the Third Council of Toledo. I will also cover the church, administration, and taxation during the Visigothic period. The religious conflict in Visigothic Iberia. We left off in episode 16 how Liuva built the Visigothic kingdom with King Liuvigild's death and the succession of his loyal son, Reccared. Upon ascending to the Visigothic throne, Reccared inherited two unresolved issues, one internal, the other external. The domestic issue was religious in nature, while externally the war with the Frankish kingdom of Burgundy was ongoing. King Antrim of Burgundy had abandoned his claims on Septimania, the last Visigothic territory in modern southern France. While the Visigoths were doing well in the war, partly with the support of some Vascons, the main challenge Reccared faced was the conflict between Catholic and Arian Christians. Why did this religious conflict arise in the first place? To modern eyes, the theological dispute may not seem significant. It centered on the equality and eternity of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in the Trinity. For the Goths, this religious distinction might have also served to defend their Gothic identity against the Hispano-Romans. However, by the mid-6th century, the Goths were not significantly different from the Hispano-Romans. Liuva proposed a somewhat more Catholic form of Arianism to unite Visigoths and Hispano-Romans under this state religion. But he failed, as Arianism was a minority faith without the widespread territorial presence of the Catholic Church. According to Gregory of Tours, Liuva repented of his religious policy and even converted to Catholicism before his death. This cannot be corroborated and it's likely false, but in the previous episode we did see how he reconciled with Catholic bishops he had exiled. The truth is there were very few Arians in Hispania, most of them Visigoths. For that reason, converting the Visigothic kingdom to Catholicism was challenging, as it involved the ruling elite. Gothic Arianism was a destabilizing factor both internally and externally. In the short term, it could cause uprisings, foreign powers could exploit the instability, and the monarch's life could be at risk. However, unless the religious issue was resolved, these risks will persist indefinitely. The 6th century was politically and religiously complex, so political and religious history must be understood together. The Visigothic monarchy needed to legitimize itself and strengthen its position against powerful secular magnates and clergy. Meanwhile, the Catholic Church faced jurisdictional conflicts among bishops. To address issues, the monarchy and the Catholic Church often collaborated to strengthen one another, and this alliance will consolidate under King Reccared. The conversion of Reccared. Reccared personally converted to Catholicism shortly after succeeding his father, announcing it publicly in January or February of 587. This was a brave move, given the risks, but he knew he had to settle the religious issue his father had failed to resolve. Some portray Reccared as the opposite of his father due to his embrace of the Catholic faith, but this is not accurate. Both pursued religious unity, albeit with different approaches, especially after seeing that his father's proposal hadn't succeeded. In fact, Liuvigild's compromise solution paved the way for Reccared, as the theological differences between Arians and Catholics had narrowed, and the conversion of some Catholic bishops to Liuvigild's Arianism may have unsettled some Catholic bishops. Arians and Catholics were thus closer to understanding each other. According to Gregory of Tours, Reccared first formed an alliance with his stepmother, Goiswintha, an ardent Arian. This political alliance may seem puzzling, given her Arianism and her presumed role in Hermenegild's rebellion, but historian José Soto Chica explains it in terms of the Visigothic kingdom's foreign policies. The daughter of Chilperic of Neustria learned of her father's death en route to Toledo to marry Reccared, and this was followed by a series of misfortunes for her. The cancellation of this marriage harmed the alliance between the Visigothic kingdom and Neustria. Goiswintha may have reconciled with Liuva and Reccared, seeing that Hermenegild's rebellion was doomed and that their alliance with the king responsible for her daughter's death was over. By securing her support, Reccared gained the backing of many Gothic magnates and, through Goiswintha's influence, made peace with Austrasia and Burgundy. Additionally, Reccared adopted Goiswintha as his foster mother, thus linking himself to her family and the Franks of Austrasia, while also seeking the hand of Goiswintha's granddaughter. Guntram of Burgundy, seeing this move as a threat to his kingdom, offered Goiswintha's daughter, the Queen of Austrasia, something her mother couldn't, making her son heir to Burgundy. This diplomatic maneuver failed, and the alliance between the Visigothic kingdom and Austrasia ended before it began. After this, Reccared likely distanced himself from Goiswintha and looked for alternatives. Leaving Goiswintha aside, Reccared needed to negotiate with the Arian clergy and gain as much support as possible. The Arian bishops feared losing their status and wealth, but Reccared assured them they would retain their hierarchical rank if they joined the Catholic Church. Reccared had already spoken with bishops Leander of Seville, Masona of Merida, and Euphemius of Toledo, arranging for the Catholic elite to accept this condition. This means that the Arians didn't surrender unconditionally. All parties made concessions to achieve the kingdom's religious unity. The opposition against Reccared. As Reccared took initial steps toward converting the Visigoths to Catholicism, he faced opposition. In fact, there were 3 attempts to overthrow him between his conversion in 587 and the Third Council of Toledo in 589. All these conspiracies used the Arian faith to legitimize their plots, though underlying motives may have been political and economic, aimed at preserving privileges. In written sources, the leaders are labeled as tyrants for having risen against the king and against God. The first plot occurred in 587 in Merida, the capital of the province of Lusitania. The conspiracy was led by a Gothic aristocrat named Sega, supported by other notable figures and by Suna, the Arian bishop of Merida. Their plan was to assassinate Masona, the Catholic metropolitan of Lusitania, and Claudius, the Duke of Lusitania, from the Hispano-Roman landed class, with the ultimate goal of usurping the throne. However, the Merida conspiracy failed due to the betrayal of the future king, Witteric, who informed Claudius of the plot. As punishment, Sega's hands were amputated and he was exiled to Galicia, while Suna was exiled to present-day Morocco, where he spent his remaining days spreading the Arian faith. Witteric thus gained the trust of Duke Claudius and the king, a twist of irony as this informant would later execute Reccared's son and take the throne, as we will see later. The second conspiracy was planned in Toledo, involving the Arian bishop of the royal see and the elderly Goiswintha, who resented her now marginal political role. Perhaps her frustration was fueled by Reccared's marriage to a woman of humble origin, possibly the mother of his heir, Liuva II, which thwarted Goiswintha's hopes of strengthening family ties with Liuvigild's dynasty. However, this attempted palace coup was uncovered. The bishop was exiled and Goiswintha died soon after, likely of natural causes. The third conspiracy was more severe, escalating into a military conflict backed by King Guntram of Burgundy. The Arian bishop of Narbonne and 2 counts of Septimania led the rebellion, but the main threat was external. A large Burgundian army besieged Carcassonne, a key city in Septimania, and King Reccared dispatched the loyal Duke of Lusitania to quell the rebellion and repel the Frankish invasion. Duke Claudius laid an ambush and the Franks fell for it easily. As recorded by Isidore of Seville, this was the greatest victory ever achieved by the Visigoths in Hispania, reportedly killing 5,000 Franks and capturing 2,000, according to Gregory of Tours, who harbored no love for the Goths. If even Frankish sources acknowledge such a defeat, it must indeed have been a spectacular Gothic victory, ironically led by a Hispano-Roman. This forced Guntram to abandon his claims on Gothic Narbonenses, and the revolt was swiftly crushed. This significant victory greatly strengthened Reccared's position and gave him enough popularity to formalize the Visigoths' conversion to Catholicism. The Third Council of Toledo and the Visigoths' conversion. Following this victory and after suppressing most internal opposition, King Reccared felt secure enough on the throne to convene the most important ecclesiastical council of Visigothic Hispania, the Third Council of Toledo. The council opened on May 4th, 589, with 3 days of prayer and fasting. Leander of Seville, Masona of Merida, and Euphemius of Toledo organized and prepared the council, gathering more than 60 bishops from all over Hispania, including, for the first time, the Bishop of Pamplona. King Reccared both convened and presided over the council, a significant event as it established the role of the Visigothic monarchy as the protector and overseer of the Catholic Church in the kingdom, a role modeled after the Roman Empire under Constantine. The king's position was reinforced, now sanctioned by God, so that to rebel against him was to rebel against God. Then, on May 8th, Reccared publicly declared that the king and the gods were renouncing Arian heresy and embracing Catholicism, accepting the resolutions of the first 4 ecumenical councils. Notably, the 5th ecumenical council, the Second Council of Constantinople, convened by Emperor Justinian, was not mentioned, as it was controversial and poorly received in the West. This, combined with Justinian's Renovatio Imperii and Liubigild's compromise solution, brought the Catholic Church closer to the Visigothic monarchy. Reccared's public declaration condemned Arian teachings, but avoided sensitive issues such as his father Liubigild's religious policy or his brother's rebellion. 8 Arian bishops, along with several Gothic clerics and aristocrats, also renounced Arianism and converted to Catholicism, thereby formalizing the Visigoths' conversion to Catholicism. Reccared then commissioned the council to approve several canons to structure the new church, define the church's powers within the state, and strengthen ecclesiastical discipline. Theologically, one canon confirmed the resolutions of the previous councils, adding what is known as the Filioque clause, which asserts that the Holy Spirit proceeds not only from the Father but also from the Son. Though this may seem trivial, the Filioque clause sparked significant controversy for centuries and was never accepted in the East. There were also canons granting new powers to bishops as judges and tax collectors. The collaboration between the Visigothic state and the Church was evident, but in the pursuit of religious unity and the belief that only one faith could coexist within the kingdom, Jews, who had lived without issues under Arian Visigothic kings, began to face persecution. For example, one canon forbade Jews from marrying Christian women or owning Christian slaves. While the persecution and laws against Jews were not yet as severe as in other countries, the Visigothic kingdom soon adopted the world's most anti-Jewish laws, all for ideological religious reasons, not because Jews monopolized wealth or certain professions, as occurred later in the Middle Ages. King Reccared issued a decree giving national and provincial Catholic council resolutions the force of law, further evidence of the Church's growing influence and the bishop's indispensable role within the state. To conclude the Third Council of Toledo, Leander of Seville delivered a homily exalting the triumph of the Church and the true faith. This was significant because the Third Council of Toledo produced 2 political discourses, one of the triumphant Church and the other of a Visigothic monarchy that had become the elite of Hispania and now allied itself with the Church. Reccared's position emerged strengthened, presenting himself as the new Constantine, the first Christian Roman emperor. The Visigothic king would henceforth serve as both king and supreme priest, emulating a unique form of Byzantine Caesaropapism without parallel in the rest of Europe, where both the monarch and the Church held reciprocal roles and responsibilities. The Third Council of Toledo not only marked the Visigoths' conversion to Catholicism, but also defined the Catholic Visigothic kingdom's structure until its end. A state where the monarch was responsible for both temporal and spiritual matters. In the Catholic Visigothic kingdom, the monarch was responsible for the spiritual well-being of the people, and the church was granted many governing powers, confirming a trend visible since the 4th century. Moreover, councils would henceforth serve as a meeting ground for the monarch, bishops, and secular aristocracy to discuss religious and political matters. While the king could legislate independently of the church, his legitimacy was greatly reinforced with its support, as his laws became inseparably linked to the faith. This new form of governance saw the monarchy and the church supporting one another, aiming to curb local powers' autonomy's ambitions and political faction struggles, although this ultimately proved unsuccessful. Reccared's religious policy may seem opposite to that of his father, but at heart they shared the same vision and objective: to unify and strengthen the kingdom and its peoples. Liuva had presented himself as head of the national Arian Church, and Reccared did the same, but with the Catholic Church. In both cases, they sought to bolster their legitimacy by governing both secular and religious affairs. The Visigoths' conversion to Catholicism marked the culmination of the integration process between Goths and Hispano-Romans, initiated by King Liuva, and since differences blurred, we can refer to them collectively as Hispano-Goths. The Reign of Reccared. The Third Council of Toledo concluded, and the Visigoths converted to Catholicism. But what happened next? After that pivotal moment in Spanish history, we know little about Reccared's reign, though some events are documented. Another attempt to overthrow him occurred in 590, led by Duke Argument. This conspiracy was suppressed, and the conspirators were executed. Before his death, Duke Argument was tortured, had his right hand cut off, and was paraded around Toledo on a donkey. There has been much speculation about the nature of this revolt, but it seems likely that it wasn't religiously motivated and took place in Galicia, the northwest recently taken from the Suebi. Argument may have been of Suebic origin and sought to restore the Suebic kingdom, suggesting that the Suebi's integration was not as immediate as the chronicles claim, and thus the Goths had to maintain a strong military presence in Galicia. I explained this in more in-depth in the episode History of the Kingdom of the Suebi on the YouTube channel, where I provide a complete overview of the Suebic kingdom's political history. Be sure to listen to it if you are interested. Using the wealth of the Visigothic treasury, bolstered by his father's conquests and confiscations, Reccared was able to pursue a more generous policy, returning properties to those who had suffered confiscations under his father, donating to the Catholic Church, and providing alms to the common people. This contrasted with Liuva's authoritarian style of rule, though overall, Reccared's policies were consistent with his father's, seeking to centralize power and reinforce the monarchy. As for foreign policy, aside from relations with the Franks, there was the issue of Byzantine Hispania. Reccared attempted to involve Pope Gregory the Great to define the borders of the province of Hispania, as well as the key bishops of the region, those of Cartagena and Malaga, who showed clear pro-Gothic sympathies. As a result, one was exiled and assassinated in Constantinople, and the other was removed from office. Throughout the Visigothic Catholic Kingdom era, both the king and bishops in Hispania displayed an increasingly distant and defiant attitude toward the Pope in Rome, as Rome was under the control of the Emperor of Constantinople, and his actions were seen as foreign interference. Diplomacy failed, and Reccared was also unsuccessful militarily in the south. General Commentiolus, who had risen rapidly to become one of the Byzantine Empire's most powerful men, fell from grace after some defeats and was sent to the peripheral province of Hispania. The Visigothic kingdom was then destabilized by Reccared's conversion and the war in Septimania, allowing Commentiolus to take advantage and defeat the Goths in the modern province of Granada, a victory that restored his political standing in the east. Witteric and Gundemar. If you have made it this far, I encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel and podcast, join the Discord to chat with me, or get notified with new releases, and support me at patreon.com/newhistoryspain or with a paid Apple Podcast subscription, to help me continue with this. That said, Reccared died in 601, and he was succeeded by his only son, Liuva II, who was then 18. We know little about him, but it's likely that his mother's lack of aristocratic blood impacted his legitimacy, as he also didn't have a faction to support him from his mother's side. Liuva II didn't have the opportunity to prove himself as a good king and warrior, as the same Witteric, who had uncovered a conspiracy against Reccared, staged a coup against Liuva II in 603. Witteric first cut off Liuva's hand to disqualify him as king, and within weeks, he ensured he wouldn't cause further trouble by executing him. Thus ended Liubegild's dynasty as the ruling house, a reminder of how difficult it is to build and how easy it is to destroy a legacy. Despite Liubegild and Reccared's efforts to elevate their dynasty's power and wealth far above other gods, this highlights the fact that the Visigothic king was simply one among the aristocracy, and no Gothic monarch managed to consolidate a hereditary dynasty for long. In fact, this coup set the tone for a 7th century Visigothic kingdom characterized by power struggles. Returning to Witteric, the little we know about his reign involves his campaigns against the Byzantines in Hispania. Witteric captured some strongholds, though according to historian José Sotochica, his successes were unremarkable given the Byzantine Empire's significant domestic problems at the time. Aside from that, Witteric arranged for one of his daughters to marry the king of Burgundy, but the marriage was cancelled after she had arrived there, and they even confiscated her dowry. This infuriated Witteric, who tried to form a coalition against Burgundy, but it came to nothing. More significantly, there was a silent yet strong opposition to Witteric among much of the aristocracy and clergy. Letters from that time revealed that a Count of Septimania was persecuted for his loyalty to Reccared and Liuva II, so it's no surprise that Witteric, a usurper turned king, had many enemies. In 610, Witteric was assassinated during a banquet by some of the same men who had elevated him to the throne. A fitting end, according to Isidore of Seville, as he died by the sword just as he had used a sword to kill Liuva II. Witteric's unpopularity was such that his corpse was dragged through the streets of Toledo, a public humiliation unprecedented in Visigothic history. His successor was Gundemar, Duke of Septimania, who pursued policies clearly opposed to strengthening the monarchy, as this was why he had been made king. We know that Gundemar launched campaigns against the Byzantine holdings in southeastern Hispania and against the stateless region of Asturias. But the most significant event of his brief reign was a provincial council where it was recognized that the metropolitan seat of the province of Carthaginensis was Toledo rather than Cartagena, which was in Byzantine hands. This decision aligned with the Gothic pressure on the Byzantines, such as creating new bishoprics close to the border and engaging in military and diplomatic missions against Byzantine Hispania. Finally, after barely 2 years of rule, Gundemar died of natural causes in 612, and was succeeded by Sisebuth, whom I will discuss in the next episode. The Church in the Visigothic period. During the Visigothic era, the Church's territorial organization in Hispania broadly followed the Roman provincial divisions, but changes occurred due to the shifting political landscape of the post-Roman world and territorial disputes among bishops. The Visigothic kingdom had 6 ecclesiastical provinces: Carthaginensis with 22 bishoprics, Tarraconensis with its metropolis in Tarragona and 15 bishoprics, Baetica centered in Seville with 10 bishoprics, Lusitania with its metropolis in Mérida and 13 bishoprics, Galicia centered in Braga with 10 bishoprics, and Narbonensis with its metropolis in Narbonne and 8 bishoprics. Toledo, as the kingdom's capital, became the metropolitan see of Carthaginensis since Cartagena was under Byzantine control. By the late 7th century, Toledo rose above all other dioceses in Hispania. After the Third Council of Toledo, the ecclesiastical hierarchy was granted roles in tax collection, an increase in the church's income and properties, and further tax benefits. Bishops could act as judges in religious and mixed secular and religious matters, oversee officials, and have voting rights in the appointment of authorities and judges. Bishops also held significant power over cities, so it was not uncommon to see officials transition between secular and ecclesiastical roles. As I have discussed extensively, the church and general and provincial councils serve as governance tools for the Visigothic kingdom. They were seen as part of the state. We know that church lands were also taxed since they had a servile population working those lands, similar to other landowners. However, the church enjoyed certain tax exemptions, and ecclesiastical property could not be transferred or sold to prevent bishops from privatizing and appropriating church properties. The church was a structure for continual growth, and this increasing wealth allowed bishops to engage in charitable acts, which served as a social cohesion mechanism to address the needs of the poor, orphans, and sick. Meanwhile, monasticism began in the Iberian Peninsula in the 4th century, though it flourished from the 6th century onward. For example, monasteries were founded by Martin and Fructuosus of Braga, Valerius of Bierzo, and the abbot Donatus, a Roman refugee who fled North Africa along with dozens of monks due to the rise of Berber attacks. Monasteries existed in cities as well as in isolated hermitages, often in remote areas, and they enjoyed privileges such as exemption from providing men for military levies. Due to these privileges and their relative independence, monasteries often clash with the bishopric or civil administration. Monasteries were economic centers geared towards self-sufficiency, and some also serve as institutions for education and cultural development, alongside episcopal schools. Interestingly, various regional monastic traditions emerged in Hispania, shaped by foreign influences and local social realities. For instance, in the north, there were numerous family monasteries where men and women lived together, partly as an alternative to becoming serfs of the local lords or bishops. These family and rural community monasteries became the most common monastic form in the north after the Muslim conquest as well. The Visigothic period deepened Spania's Christianization, especially in rural areas in the north. Even so, the church struggled to maintain clerical discipline, prevent heresies, and adequately train priests and monks. This educational challenge was particularly acute in peripheral regions like the Balearic Islands and Galicia, though efforts were made by Martin of Braga to train clergy and by Isidore of Seville to unify the liturgy in Hispania, in what would later be called the Mozarabic Rite. Visigothic taxation and administration. The main governing institution in Visigothic Iberia was the Aula Regia or Royal Palace, a body composed of loyal secular and ecclesiastical figures who advised the king or performed specific functions. Among its officials were, for example, the Count of the Treasury, responsible for managing the royal treasury and coin minting, the Count of the Patrimony, who managed the king's estates and properties, and the Count of the Notaries, who drafted laws and handled administrative documents and diplomatic correspondence. The royal palace was akin to the late Roman bureaucratic apparatus, but smaller in scale. Territorially, the Visigothic kingdom was divided into provinces, though the exact divisions remain unclear due to conflicting information. The provinces of Carthaginensis, Narbonensis, Tarraconensis, Baetica, Lusitania, and Galicia were retained, with possible smaller additions by the late 7th century, such as Cantabria and Asturias, with their capitals in Amaya and Astorga respectively. These later areas would have been frontier provinces since most of modern Asturias and Cantabria lay beyond Gothic control, much like most of Vasconia, meaning the Basque Country and Navarre. Provinces were initially governed by the so-called rector, who held civil authority, and a duke, who held military authority. Over time, the role of rector disappeared, and the duke assumed both functions. Under the Duke's authority were counts, who held civil and military responsibilities over cities and surrounding areas. Dukes and counts collected taxes, managed garrisons and provincial and local administration, and dispensed justice. To maintain order, they employed what we call sayones in Spanish, who acted as police and bailiffs in the cities. In addition to these secular institutions at the central, provincial, and local levels, there were ecclesiastical institutions at each level, also assuming governmental roles, as we have seen. Political matters and laws were discussed in the councils of Toledo at the central level, alongside doctrinal and church property issues. Provincial councils also convened to legislate, and at the local level, bishops took on many civil functions. Thus, the administration of the Visigothic kingdom was characterized by intense collaboration between secular and ecclesiastical power. Regarding taxation, the Roman tax system, which relied predominantly on income taxes, collapsed in the 5th century. This doesn't mean that taxes and all forms of resource extraction disappeared overnight, or that revenue solely derived from renting out lands. But there was a clear trend toward reduced tax collecting capacity in post-Roman states compared to earlier periods. Peasants paid rent and tribute in kind, like a portion of their harvest or livestock, to their landlord and the state. As in other post-Roman kingdoms, the Visigothic kingdom of Toledo lacked a robust tax collection organization or a standing army beyond the soldiers garrisoned in cities and select critical locations. Like other kingdoms of the time, the Visigothic kingdom was unable to impose a uniform, centralized tax system in all the territories under its authority. In the fragmented political reality of the post-Roman world, a heterogeneous fiscal system was necessary, negotiated with local elites in each area. Numismatic evidence and a letter from the 520s indicate that local elites outside of state control also minted their own currency, appropriating all revenue from their domains and the profits associated with minting coins. Moreover, such minting symbolized the sovereignty of notable figures who didn't recognize Visigothic, Ostrogothic, or Suevic authority at the time. During the Visigothic period, silver and bronze coins circulated. Beginning with Liuva, the minting of gold coins became the exclusive right of the Visigothic king. In Galicia, since the Suevic era, local powers had minted their own coins, which is why most Visigothic mints were located in Galicia. However, they produced very little and did not mine continuously or in large amounts. More than 7,700 Visigothic coins have been documented, but there will likely be many more, including those not yet uncovered in archaeological sites or undocumented due to illegal possession in private collections. Many were melted down and converted into Arab gold coins after the Muslim conquest. Taxation served as a means of resource extraction and a tool to foster political loyalty between the Visigothic monarchy and local elites and obtain resources for redistribution for the king's loyal followers. The verdict. In today's The Verdict, I would like to dive a bit deeper into the long-term consequences of the alliance between the Visigothic state and the Catholic Church. I find the unique governance model of the Catholic Visigothic kingdom very intriguing because it wasn't a strictly Caesaropapist, meaning the state or emperor rules over the church, nor truly theocratic, as I have read elsewhere. Rather, it was a peculiar mix that worked well for decades. In the Visigothic kingdom, the king was deeply involved in ecclesiastical matters, similar to Byzantine Caesaropapism, but at the same time, the church held extensive secular powers that transcended its religious role. As I have mentioned before, this governance model relied on a close and symbiotic relationship between the monarchy and the church, aiming to strengthen the power of both and provide mutual legitimacy. However, one drawback for the monarchy was that its association with the church did not make the king's position any more secure. It failed to prevent the kingdom's endemic revolts and conspiracies. This is undoubtedly one of the Visigothic kingdom's major failures. Do you think the dynasty of Liuva could have done more to consolidate its power? Or did the kingdom's socio-economic characteristics make it impossible to avoid these power struggles? I look forward to your thoughts in the comments. And with that, the verdict ends. If you enjoyed the episode, please give it a thumbs up, comment, and share to help boost its visibility. If you know other history lovers, please share the show to help me grow. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell on YouTube, or follow the podcast New History of Spain for more Spanish history content. You can support me on Patreon or Apple Podcasts to receive exclusive benefits like 1 month early access to episodes of this chronological series. The links are in the episode description. In the next episode, we will explore the political history of the Visigothic kingdom in the first half of the 7th century up to King Talga, as well as the cultural development of the Visigothic kingdom. Thanks for listening, and see you soon!